Am I live yet? I think I am. Okay, 7:35 p.m. 3/1/2025. I've done meaning read Tennessee Williams, Eugene O'Neill, um, uh, why am I drawing a blank? Patty Chayefsky, and now I'd like to switch gears a little bit and dive into some of Arthur Miller. I bought this book, dude, probably about 10 years ago. And it's been sitting collecting dust ever since. And probably because of this, because I've been intimidated by this, because there's so much to read and my eyeballs go to like what a challenge this is instead of just taking it one, not story, but play at a time. So I'm not going to say I'm going to read this all, but I want to at least try the classics and the standards, but I'm going to go ahead and start chronologically with the first story. I keep wanting to say story, and it is. But let's give The Man Who Had All the Luck a try first, and then maybe we'll dive into like Death of a Salesman or The Crucible afterwards. Not all in one go. Like after each play is going to take 1 or 2 or 3 videos because I can't read like 100 pages in one go. But let's give Arthur Miller a turn and a try and see what we come up with. What little I know of Arthur Miller is The Misfits, Death of a Salesman, The Crucible, and I'm sure a handful of others, but not very much. I'm kind of embarrassed to say I don't know too much beyond that. And other than he was obviously a very prolific playwright, was married to Marilyn Monroe, and that's about the extent of my knowledge, which isn't very much. So let's dive in and learn a little bit. And read a play or two of, or 3 or more of his. Give him a turn. Okay, so like I said, today I'm going to give The Man Who Had All the Luck a try. And it's a fable, 1944, characters, David Beeves, Shorey, J.B. Feller, Andrew Falk, Patterson Pat Beeves, Hester Falk, Dan Dibble, Gustav Eberson, Augie Belfast, Aunt Bell. Synopsis of scenes. The time not so long ago. Act 1. Scene 1. An evening in early April, inside a barn used as a repair shop. Scene 2. The barn near dawn. Act 2. Scene 1. June. About 3 years later. The living room of the Foxes, now David's house. Scene 2. Later that day, the living room. Act 3. Scene 1. The following February, living room. Scene 2. 1 month later, the living room at evening. Reading these is a little bit of spoilers, but let's disregard that and going cold to Act 1, Scene 1 of The Man Who Had All the Luck by Arthur Miller. Scene 1. Act 1, Scene 1. A barn in a small Midwestern town. It is set on a rake angle. The back wall of the barn sweeps toward upstage and right, and the big entrance doors are in this wall. Along the left wall, a workbench on which auto tools lie along with some old parts and rags and general mechanics junk. A rack over the bench holds wrenches, screwdrivers, other tools. In the left wall is a normal-sized door leading into Shorey's feed and grain store, to which this barn is attached. A step-high ramp leads down from the threshold of this door into the barn. Further to the left, extending into the offstage area along the wall, are piles of cement bags. In front of them, several new barrels that contain fertilizer. Downstage, near the center, is a small wood stove, now glowing red. Over the bench is a hanging bulb. There is a big garage jack on the floor, several old nail barrels for chairs, two of them by the stove. A large drum of alcohol lies on blocks. Downstage right. Near it are scattered a few gallon tins. This is an old barn being used partly as a storage place and mainly as an auto repair shop. The timber supports have a warm oak color, unstained. The colors of wood dominate the scene, and the gray of the cement bags. Before the rise, two car horns, one of them the old-fashioned ga-ga-ga type of the old Ford, are heard honking impatiently. An instant of this, and the curtain rises. David Beeves is filling a can from an alcohol drum. He is 22. He has the earnest manner of a young, small-town businessman until he forgets it, which is most of the time. Then he becomes what he is: wondrous, funny, naive, and always searching. He wears a windbreaker. Enter J.B. Feller from the right. He is a fat man near 50, dressed for winter. A certain delicacy of feeling clings to his big face. He has a light way of walking despite his weight. J.B. Sure doing nice business on that alcohol, huh, David? Thumbing right. They're freezing out there. Better step on it. David. Near every car in town's been here today for some. April. What a laugh. JB nods downstage. My store got so cold I had to close off the infant's wear counter. I think I'll get a revolving door for next winter. Sits. What you got your hair all slicked for? David, on one knee, examines the spigot which pours slowly. Going over to Hester's in a while. JB. Dave. Excitedly. Going alone? David. Hester'll be here right away. I'm going to walk back to the house with her and, well, I guess we'll lay down the law to him. If he's going to be my father-in-law, I better start talking to him sometime. JB anxiously. The only thing is you want to watch your step with him. David turns off spigot, lifts up can as he gets to his feet. I can't believe that he'd actually start a battle with me. You think he would? JB. Old man Falk is a very peculiar man, Dave. Horns sound from the right. David. Going right with the can. Coming. Coming. He goes out as from the back door. Shortly descends the ramp in a fury. He is in a wheelchair. He is 38, but his age is hard to tell because of the absence of any hair on his body. He is totally bald. His beard does not grow. His eyebrows are gone. His face is capable of great laughter and of terrible sneers. A dark green blanket covers his legs. He stops at the big doors with his fist in the air. As he speaks, the horns stop. Shorey, God damn you, shut those goddamn horns. Can't you wait a goddamn minute? JB, lay off, will ya? They're his customers. Shorey turns. What are you doing, living here? JB, why? Got any objections? Goes to stove, clapping his arms. Jesus, how can he work in this place? You could hang meat in here. Warms his hands on the stove. Shorey, you cold with all that fat on you? JB, I don't know why everybody thinks a fat man is always warm. There's nerves in the fat too, you know. Shorey, come into the store. It's warmer. Shoot some pinochle. Starts towards the ramp into his store. JB, Dave's going over to see Falk. Shorey stops. Shorey, Dave's not going to Falk. JB, he just told me. Shorey turns again. Listen, Since the day he walked into the store and asked me for a job, he's been planning on going to see Falk about Hester. That's 7 years of procrastination, and it ain't gonna end tonight. What is it with you lately? You hang around him like an old cow or something. Would your wife throw you out of the house again? JB. No, I don't drink anymore. Not any important drinking, really. He sits on a barrel. I keep thinking about those 2 kids. It's so rare. 2 people staying in love since they were children. That oughtn't to be trifled with. Shori. Your wife did throw you out, didn't she? JB. No, but we just got the last word. No kids. Shori compassionately. That's so, Doctor? JB. Yeah. No kids. Too old. Big nice store with 31 different departments. Beautiful house. No kids. Isn't that something? You die and they wipe your name off the mailbox and that's the ball game. Slight pause. Changing the subject with some relish. I think I might be able to put Dave next to something very nice, Shori. You're in your dotage, you know that? You're getting a Santa Claus complex. JB. No, he just reminds me of somebody. Myself, in fact. At his age, I was in a roaring confusion. And him? He's got his whole life laid out like a piece of linoleum. I don't know why, but sometimes I'm around him and it's like watching one of them nice movies where you know everything is going to turn out good. Suddenly strikes him. I guess it's because he's so young and I'm getting so goddamn old. Shori. What's this you're putting him next to? JB. My brother-in-law up in Burley. You know Dan Dibble. That's got the mink ranch. Shori. Oh, don't bring him around now. JB. Listen. His car is on the bum and he's looking for a mechanic. He's a sucker for a mechanic. Shori. That hayseed couldn't let go of a nickel if it was stuck up his... Roar of engines starting close by outside. Entered David from the upstage door, putting a small wrench in his pocket. As he comes in, 2 cars are heard pulling away. He goes to a can of gasoline and rinses his hands. David. Geez, you'd think people could tighten a fan belt. What time you got, John? Shori. Why? Where are you going? You can't go into Falk's house. From the store enter Aunt Belle. She is carrying a wrapped shirt and a bag. She is a woman who was never young. Skinny, bird-like, constantly sniveling. A kerchief grows out of her hand. Belle. I thought you were in the store. Hester said to hurry. David, going to her. Oh, thanks, Belle. Unwrapping a shirt. It's the new one, isn't it? Belle, horrified. Did you want the new one? David, looking at his shirt. Oh, Belle, when are you going to remember something? Hester told you to bring my new shirt. Belle, lifting them out of the bag. Well, I brought your galoshes. David, I don't wear galoshes anymore. I wanted my new shirt. Belle, sometimes you... Belle bursts into tears. All right, forget it. Belle, I only do my best. I'm not your mother. David, leading her right. I'm sorry, Aunt Belle. Go, and thanks. Belle, still sniffling. Your father's got your brother Amos out running on the road. David. Yeah, well, thanks. Belle, a kerchief at her nose. He makes Amos put on his galoshes. Why doesn't he give a thought to you? David pats her hand. I'll be home later. Shori. You know why you never remember anything, Belle? You blow your nose too much. The nose is connected with the brain, and you're blowing your brains out. David. Aw, cut it out, will ya? With another sob, Belle rushes out. She still treats me like after Mom died, just like I was 7 years old. David picks up the clean shirt. Shori, alarmed. Listen, that man'll kill you. Grabs the shirt and sits on it. David, with an embarrassed but determined laugh, trying to grab the shirt back. Give me that. I decided to go see him, and I'm gonna go see him. Enter Pat and Amos from right. Pat is a small, nervous man about 45. Amos is 24, given to a drawl and a tendency to lumber when he walks. Pat, on entering. What's the matter with you? David looks up. All turn to him as both come center. Amos is squeezing a rubber ball. Pointing between David and stove. Don't you know better than to stand so close to that stove? Heat is ruination to the arteries. Amos, eagerly. You going, Dave? Shori, to Pat. Everything was getting clearer. Will you go home? Pat, I'm his father, if you please. Shori. Then tell him what to do, father. Pat, I'll tell him. Turns to David as though to command. What exactly did you decide? David. We're going to tell Mr. Andrew Falk we're getting married. Pat. Uh-huh. Good work. Shori. Good work. Pointing to Pat, he turns to JB. Will you listen to this? JB. He shares Shori's attitude toward Pat with more compassion. But somebody ought to go along with him. Pat, adamantly to David. Definitely somebody ought to go along. Amos to David. Let me go. If he starts anything, I'll... David to all. Now look. For Christ's sake, will you? Pat to David. I forbid you to curse. Close your collar, Amos. Of Amos to JB. Just ran 2 miles. He buttons another button on Amos, indicating Amos's ball. How do you like the new method? Amos holds up ball. Squeezing a rubber ball. JB. What's that, for his fingers? David examines his arm. Pat. Fingers. That's the old forearm. A pitcher can have everything, but without a forearm, 0. Shori to Pat of Dave. Are you going to settle this, or is he going to get himself murdered in that house? Pat. Who? What house? Recalling. Oh, yeah. Dave. Shori to JB. Oh, yes, Dave. To Pat. You're his father. Forget. David. All right. I got enough advice. Hester's coming here right away, and we're going over to the house, and we'll talk it out. And if... Shori. His brains are busted. How are you going to talk to him? He doesn't like you. He doesn't want you. He said he'd shoot you if you came onto his place. Now, will you start from there and figure it out, or you got to put it together in the hospital? Pause. David. What am I supposed to do then? Let him send her to that normal school? I might never see her again. I know how these things work. Shori. You don't know how these things work. 2 years I waited in there for a boy to ask for the job I put up in the window. I could have made a big stink about it. I was a veteran. People ought to explain to the kids why I looked like this. But I learned something across the sea. Never go looking for trouble. I waited, and you came. Wait, Davy. Pat. I'm inclined to agree with him, David. David. I've been waiting to marry Hester since we were babies. Sits on a barrel. God, how do you know when to wait and when to take things in your hand and make them happen? Shori, you can't make anything happen any more than a jellyfish makes the tides, David. David. What do you say, John? JB. I'd hate to see you battle old man Falk, but personally, Dave, I don't believe in waiting too long. A man's got to have faith, I think, and push right out into the current and... Pat leans forward, pointing. Faith, David, is a great thing. Take me, for instance. When I came back from the sea... David. What time you got, John? Excuse me, Dad. JB. 7:50. David to Shori. You giving me that shirt or must I push you off that chair? Pat, continuing. I'm speaking, David. When I came back from the sea, Shori pointing at Amos, before you come back from the sea, you're going to kill him running his ass off into the snow. Pat, kill him. Why, it's common knowledge that pacing is indispensable for the arches. After all, a pitcher can have everything, but if his arches are not perfect... Shori, 0. Pat, before I forget, do you know if that alcohol can be used for rubbing? Indicates the drum. David, there's only a couple of drops left. Amos, you sold it all today? Joyously to Pat, I told you he'd sell it all. David, don't go making a genius out of your brother. Salesman hooked him. He bought alcohol in April when the sun was shining hot as hell. Amos, yeah, but look how it froze up today. Shori, he didn't know it was going to freeze. JB, maybe he did know. To Dave, did you, Dave? David stares into his memory. Well, I kind of thought... Pat breaking in. Speaking of geniuses, most people didn't know that there are 2 kinds, physical and mental. Take pictures like Christy Mathewson now, or Walter Johnson. There you have it in a nutshell. Am I right, JB? Shori, what have you got in a nutshell? Pat, the beginnings of confusion. His desire to protect Amos and himself against everyone tremble in him. Just what I said. People simply refuse to concentrate. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing in their lives. Shori, pointing to David. Example number 1. Pat rises to a self-induced froth of a climax. I always left David to concentrate for himself. But take Amos then. When I got back from the sea, I came home and what do I find? An infant in his mother's arms. I felt his body and I saw it was strong. And I said to myself, this boy is not going to waste out his life being 17 different kind of things and ending up nothing. He's going to play baseball. And by ginger, he's been throwing against the target down the cellar 7 days a week for 12 solid years. That's concentration. That's faith. That's taking your life in your own hands and molding it to fit the thing you want. That's bound to have an effect. And don't you think they don't know it? Shori. Who knows it? Pat with a cry. I don't like everybody's attitude. Silence with an instant, all staring at him. It's still winter. Can he play in the winter? Shori. Who are you talking about? David, going away toward the right, bored and disgusted. Dad, he didn't say... Pat, he doesn't have to say it. You people seem to think he's going to go through life pitching Sundays in the sand lots. To all. Pitching's his business. It's a regular business like running a store or being a mechanic or anything else. And it happens that in the winter there is nothing to do in his business but sit home and wait. JB. Well, yeah, Pat. That's just what he ought to be doing. Pat. Then why does everybody look at him as though... He raises his hand to his head, utterly confused and ashamed for his outburst. A long pause like this. David, unable to bear it, he goes to Pat. Sit down, Dad. Sit down. He gets a barrel under Pat, who sits, staring, exhausted. Pat. I can't understand it. Every paper in the country calls him a phenomenon. As he speaks, David, feeling Pat's pain, goes right a few yards and stands looking away. Undefeated. He's ready for the big leagues. Been ready for 3 years. Who can explain a thing like that? Why don't they send a scout? David. I've been thinking about that, Dad. Maybe you ought to call the Detroit Tigers again. Amos, peevishly. This has been in him a long time. He never called them in the first place. Pat. Now, Amos... David, reprimanding. Dad? Amos. He didn't call them. To Pat. I want to know. David to Pat. But last summer you said, Pat. I picked up the phone a lot of times, but I I wanted it to happen naturally. It ought to happen naturally, Dave. Shori. You mean you don't want to hear them say no? Pat. Well, yes, I admit that. To David. If I call now and demand an answer, maybe they'll have to say no. I don't want to put that word in their head in relation to Amos. It's a great psychological thing here. Once they refuse, it's twice as hard to get them to accept. David. But Dad, maybe they forgot to send a scout. Maybe they even thought they'd send one and didn't. And when you call, they'll thank you for reminding them. To all. I mean, can you just wait for something to happen? Shori claps. Pinochle? Let's go. Come on, John. Pat. They start for the store door. JB glancing at his watch. My wife will murder me. Shori. Why? Pinochle leaves no odor on the breath. Pat turning at Ramp. I want you to watch us, Amos. Pinochle is very good for the figuring sense. Help you lose on base play. Open your coat. Pat follows Shori and JB into the store. Amos dutifully starts to follow, hesitates at the door, then closes it behind them and comes to David. Amos. Dave, I want to ask you something. He glances toward the door, then quietly. Take me over, will you? David just looks at him. Do something for me. I'm standing still. I'm not going anywhere. I swear I'm getting ashamed. David. Oh, don't. Don't, Amos, no. I am. Since I started to play, everybody's been saying mimics. Amos is going someplace. Amos is going someplace. I've been out of high school 5 years and I'm still taking spending money. I want to find a girl. I want to get married. I want to start doing things. You're moving like a daisy cutter, Dave. You know how to do. Take me over. David. But I don't know half what Pop knows about baseball, about training, or Amos. I don't care. You didn't know anything about cars either, and look what you made here. David. What did I make? I got nothing. I still don't know anything about cars. Amos. But you do. Everybody knows you know. David. Everybody's crazy. Don't envy me, Aim. If every car I ever fixed came rolling in here tomorrow morning and the guys said I did it wrong, I wouldn't be surprised. I started on Shori's Ford and I got another one and another, and before I knew what was happening, they called me a mechanic. But I ain't a trained man. You are. You got something. Takes his arm with deepest feeling. And you're gonna be great. Because you deserve it. You know something perfect. Don't look to me. I could be out on that street tomorrow morning and then I wouldn't look so smart. Don't laugh at Pop. You're his whole life, Aim, you hear me? You stay with him. Amos. Gee, Dave. You always make me feel so good. Suddenly, like Pat, ecstatic. When I'm in the leagues, I'm going to buy you a whole goddamn garage. Enter Hester from the right. She is a full-grown girl, a heartily developed girl. She can run fast, swim hard, and lift heavy things. Not stylishly, with the most economical and direct way to run, swim, and lift. She has a loud, throaty laugh. Her femininity dwells in one fact. She loves David with all her might. Always has. And she doesn't feel she's doing anything when he's not around. The pallor of tragedy is nowhere near her. She enters breathless, not from running, but from expectation. Hester. David, he's home. Goes to David and cups his face in her hands. He just came back. Are you ready? Looks around David's shoulder at Amos. Hello, Aim. How's the arm? Amos, good as ever. Hester, you do that long division I gave you? Amos, well, I've been working at it. Hester, there's nothing better than arithmetic to sharpen you up. You'll see. When you get on the diamond again, you'll be quicker on base play. We better go, David. Amos awkwardly. Well, good luck to you. He goes to the store door. David. Thanks, Aim. Amos waves, goes through the door and closes it behind him. Hester. What are you looking so pruny about? Don't you want to go? David. I'm scared, Hess. I don't mind telling you. I'm scared. Hester. Of a beating? David. You know I was never scared of a beating. Hester. We always knew we'd have to tell him, didn't we? David. Yeah, but I always thought that by that time we had to, I'd be somebody, you know? Hester. But you are somebody. David. But just think of it from his side. He's a big farmer, 110 of the best acres in the county. Supposing he asks me, I only got $394 counting today. Hester. But we always said when you had $350 we'd ask him. David. God, if I was a lawyer or a doctor, or even a bookkeeper. Hester. A mechanic's good as a bookkeeper. David. Yeah, but I don't know if I'm a mechanic. Takes her hand. Hess. Listen. In a year, maybe I could build up some kind of a real business. Something he could look at and see. Hester. A year? Davy, don't you? David, I mean, let's get married now, without asking him. Hester. I told you, I can't. David, if we went away, far, far away. Hester. Wherever we went, I'd always be afraid he'd knock on the door. You don't know what he can do when he's mad. He roared my mother to her grave. We have to face him with it, Davy. It seems now that I've known it since we were babies. When I used to talk to you at night through the kitchen window, when I'd meet you to ride around the quarry in Shore's car, even as far back as the last of the Mohicans in 6B, I always knew we'd have to sit in the house together and listen to him roaring at us. We have to, Davy. She steps away as though to give him a choice. David. He smiles. A laugh escapes him. You know, Hess, I don't only love you. You're my best friend. Hester springs at him and kisses him. They are locked in the embrace when a figure enters from the right. It is Dan Dibble, a little sun-dried farmer, stolidly dressed, a Mackinaw, felt hat. He hesitates a moment, then, Dibble. Excuse me, J.B. Feller. Is J.B. Feller in here? David. J.B.? Sure. Points at back door. Go through there, he's in the store. Dibble. Much obliged. David. That's all right, sir. Dibble tips his hat slightly to Hester, goes a few yards toward the door, turns. Dibble. You Dave Beeves, mechanic? David. Yes, sir, that's me. Dibble nods, turns, goes up the ramp and into the store, closing the door behind him. David looks after him. Hester. Come, Davy. David. Yeah, I'll get my coat. He goes to rail it back where it hangs, starts to put it on. Gosh, I better change my shirt. Shorey grabbed my clean one before. I guess he took it in the store with him. Hester, knowingly. He doesn't think you ought to go. David. Well, he was just kidding around. I'll only be a minute. Dave starts for the store door when it opens, and JB surges out, full of excitement. Dibble follows him, then Amos, then Pat, and finally Shorey, who looks on from his wheelchair above the ramp. JB. Hey, Dave. Dave, come here. To Dan. You won't regret it, Dan. Dave. Want you to meet my brother-in-law from up in Burley. Dan Dibble. David. Yes, sir. How do you do? JB. Dan's got a brand new Mormon. He's down here for a funeral, see, and he's staying at my house. David to JB. A note of faltering. Marmon, did you say? JB. Yeah, Marmon. Imperatively. You know the Marmon, Dave. David. Sure, yeah. To Dan. Well, bring it around. I'll be glad to work on her. I've got to go right now. JB. Dan, will you wait in my car? Just want to explain a few things. I'll be right out and we'll go. Dibble. Hurry up, it's cold out there. I'd like him to get it fixed up by tomorrow. It's shaking me up so. I think I'm getting my appendix back. JB, jollying him to the door. I don't think they grow back once they're cut out. Dibble. Well, it feels like it. Be damned if I'll ever buy a Marmon again. Dibble goes out. JB. He comes back to Dave. This idiot is one of the richest farmers in the Burley district. He's got that mink ranch I was telling you about. David. Say, I don't know anything about a Mormon. JB. Neither does he. He's got 2 vacuum cleaners in his house and never uses nothing but a broom. Now listen. He claims she ain't hitting right. I've been trying the past 2 weeks to get him to bring her down here to you. I get this. Besides the mink ranch, he's got a wheat farm with 5 tractors. Hester. 5 tractors? JB. He's an idiot, but he's made a fortune out of mink. Now you clean up this Mormon for him and you'll open your door to the biggest tractor farms in the state. There's big money in tractor work. You know that. He's got 1,000 friends and they follow him. They'll follow him here. David. Uh-huh. But I don't know anything about tractors. Hester. Oh, heck, you'll learn. David. Yeah, but I can't learn on his tractors. Hester. Yeah, but... JB. Listen. This could be the biggest thing that ever happened to you. The Mormon's over at my house. He'll be afraid to drive her any further on the snow. I'll bring her over and you'll go to work, all right? David. Yeah, but... Look, John, JB, you better get in early and start on her first thing in the morning, all right? Hester, with a loud bubble of laughter. David, that's wonderful. David, quickly. See, if we waited, Hess, in six months, maybe less, I'd have something to show. Hester. But I'm going to normal in a week if we don't do it now. Shorey. You're pushing him, Hester. Hester, a sudden outburst at Shorey. Stop talking to him. A person isn't a frog to wait and wait for something to happen. Shorey. He'll fight your father if you drag him there tonight, and your father can kill him. David takes her hand evenly. Come on, Hess. We'll go. To JB. Bring the car over. I'll be back later. But JB is staring off right down the driveway. Dave turns with Hester and all to follow his stare. She steps a foot away from him. Enter Andrew Falk, a tall old man, hard as iron, nearsighted, slightly stooped. Sound of idling motor outside. JB. After a moment. I'll bring the car, Dave. 5 minutes. David, affecting a businesslike, careless flair. Right, JB, I'll fix him up. As JB goes out. And thanks loads, John. Falk has been looking at Hester, who dares every other moment to look up from the floor at him. David turns to Falk, desperately controlling his voice. Pat enters from Shorey's store. Evening, Mr. Falk. You want to go into Shorey's store? There's chairs there. Falk turns deliberately, heavily looks at him. You left your engine running. Stay a while, let me shut it off. Falk. You willing to push it? David. Oh, battery rundown? Falk, caustically. I don't know what else you would. I don't know what else would prevent her from turning over without a push. To Hester. I'll see you home. Hester, smiling, she goes to him but does not touch him. We were just coming to the house, Daddy. Falk, go on home, Hester. David. We'd like to talk to you, Mr. Falk, indicating the store. We could all go. Falk in reply. Going home, Hester. David, with a swipe at indignation. I'd like for her to be here, Mr. Falk. Falk. He does not even look at David. I'll be home right away. He takes her arm and moves her to the right. She digs her heels in. Hester. A cry. Daddy, why? She breaks off, looking into his face. With a sob, she breaks from him and runs off right. He turns slowly to David, takes a breath. David, angering. That ain't gonna work anymore, Mr. Falk. We're old enough now. Pat, reasonably. Look, Falk, why don't we... Falk, to David without so much as a glance at Pat. This is the last time I'm ever gonna talk to you, Beeves. You... David. Why is it you're the only man who hates me like this? Everybody else, Falk. Nobody but me knows what you are. Shorey, from the store doorway. What is he? What are you blowing off about? Falk, his first rise of voice. He points at Shorey. The good God gave you your answer long ago. Keep your black tongue in your head when I'm here. Shorey, nervously, to David. His brains are swimming, don't you see? What are you bothering with him for? Falk, roaring. He takes a stride towards Shorey. Shut up, you whoremonger. You ruined your last woman on this earth. The good God saw to that. Shorey, with a screech of fury. You don't scare me, Falk. You've been dead 20 years. Why don't you bury yourself? Falk strangely relaxes. Walks away from Shorey's direction, raising his shoulder to run his chin on his coat collar. The motor outside stalls. His head cocks toward right. David, pointing to the right. Your car stalled. I'll start her up for you. Falk, don't touch anything I own. Pause. What were you doing that night I caught you with her by the river? You got backbone enough to tell me that? David recalls. Oh, we were kids then, just talking, that's all. Falk, you never come and ask me if she could talk to you. You come sneaking every time like a rat through the fences. David, well, Hess was always scared to ask you, and I guess I got it from her. Falk, you're scared of me now too, and you know why, Beeves? Nobody but me knows what you are. David. Why? What am I? Falk. You're a lost soul. A lost man. You don't know the nights I've watched you sitting on the river ice, fishing through a hole, alone. Alone like an old man with a boy's face. Or making you a fire in Keldon's woods where nobody could see. And that Sunday night you nearly burned down the church. David. I was nowhere near the church that night. Falk. It could have been nobody else. When the church burned, there was never a sign from God that was so clear. Amos. He was down in the cellar with me when the church burned. Falk looks at Amos. I'm not blind. Turns back to David. The man Hester marries is going to know what he's about. He's going to be a steady man that I can trust with what I brought forth in this world. He's going to know his God. He's going to know where he came from and where he's going. You ain't that man. He turns to go. David. I'm marrying Hester, Mr. Falk. Falk stops, turns. I'm sorry, but we're going to marry. Falk. Beeves. If you ever step onto my land again, I'll put a bullet through you. May God write my words. I don't fool, Beeves. Don't go near her again. Points to Shorey. No man who could ever find a friend in that lump of corruption is going to live in my daughter's house. He starts to go again. David. I'm marrying Hester, Mr. Falk. We're going to do it. Fuck. You'll sleep with your shroud first, Beeves. I'm old enough to know what I'll do. Stay away. He goes to the right edge of the stage and hesitates, looking off right in the direction of his stalled car. David starts doubtfully toward him, looking over his shoulder. Shori rolling down the ramp. Let him start it himself. Don't be a damned fool. Falk hurries out. Pat, pointing right. Maybe you ought to give him a push. Shori, not on your life. He pushes himself between Dave and the door. Get away from there. Go on. David looking off right all the time. Shori, he's going. What can I say to him? Starts to go right. I'll help him. Shori pushes him back. Get away. Calling off right. That's it, Grandpa. Push it. Push it. Harder, you crazy bastard. It's only half a mile. Go ahead, harder. Laughs wildly, mockingly. David wrenches the chair around. Stop it. Shori, you can't talk to that man. You're through, you damned fool. David suddenly, come on, Aim. We'll pick up Hester on the road before he gets home. I'm going to do it tonight, by God. Amos, in ecstasy at the thought of the action, he wings the ball across the stage. Let's go. Pat grabs David. No, Dave. David, furiously. No, I gotta do it, Dad. Pat, I forbid it. To Amos, I forbid you to go. To David. She's his daughter and he's got a right, David. David, right? What right has he got? She wants me. Pat, then let her break from him. That's not your province. David, she's scared to death of him. The whole thing is between me and Hester. I don't understand why I can't have that girl. Shori, sardonically. Must there be a reason? David. He stops for an instant as though a light flashed on him. Yes. There has to be a reason. I did everything a man could do. I didn't do anything wrong. And, Shori, you didn't have to. Dave stares at Shori. A man is a jellyfish. The tide goes in and the tide goes out. About what happens to him, a man has very little to say. When are you going to get used to it? David stands staring. Pat, you better go home and sleep, Dave. Sleep is a great doctor, you know. Shori, gently. He said it, Dave. Entered JB in a hurry. JB. Where's Dan? Where's the Mormon? Pat, he didn't come here. JB. That ox. I'll tell him I'll drive it over for him. No, Dan Dibble don't allow anybody behind the wheel but himself. I'll go into the house to tell Ellie I'm going, and when I come out, he's gone. Starts to go right. That 7-passenger moron. David. He probably decided to go back home to Burley. JB. No, I'm sure he's trying to get here. Rugged individualist. I'll find him on some dirt road someplace. He shuts up abruptly as the door slams outside. All look right. David, alarmed. Hester! He quickly goes off right. For an instant, Amos, Pat, and Shori are galvanized. Amos goes off and returns immediately supporting Dan Dibble, who is shaking all over and seems about to collapse in distress. Dibble, on entering. God help me. God in heaven help me. Enter David and JB helping Hester. She is sobbing on David's arm and he's trying to lift her face up. David. Stop crying. What's the matter? Hester, stop it. What happened? JB. Dibble goes prayerfully to Hester. I couldn't see him, miss. How in the world could I see him? His car had no lights. Hester's loud sob cuts him off. David to Dan. What happened? What'd you do? Dibble. Oh, God in heaven, help me. JB goes to him, pulls his hands down. Dan, stop that. For Pete's sake, what happened? Dibble. This girl's father, an old man, I couldn't see him. He was pushing a car without lights. There were no lights at all, and he walked out from behind just as I came on him. But for Hester's subsiding sobs, there is silence for a moment. She looks at David, who looks once at her, then comes to life. David to Dan. Where is he now? Dibble points upstage. I took him to his house. She was there. It happened a few feet from his house. David, horrified. Well, why didn't you get a doctor? He starts for the back door. Hester. No. He's dead, Davy. Almost at the ramp, David stops as though shot. After an instant, he turns quickly. He comes as in a dream a few yards toward her and, as in a dream, halts, staring at her. He's dead. David stares at her, then turns his head to Pat, Amos, Shorey, Dan, as though to seek reality. Then looking at her once more, he goes to the nail barrel and sits. David, whisper. I'll be darned. Goes to Hester after a moment. I'm so sorry. Hester. It was nobody's fault. Oh, that poor man. Pat goes to David. You better come home, David. David. He gets up, goes to Hester, takes her hand. Hess, I really am sorry. Hester looks at him. A smile comes to her face. She thankfully throws her arms around him and sobs. Don't, Hess. Don't cry anymore, please. Hess. John, take her to your house for tonight, huh? JB, I was gonna do that. Takes Hester's arm. Come on, baby. I'll tend to everything. David. Good night, Hess. You sleep, huh? Hester. You mustn't feel any fault, Davy. David. I could have gotten him started, that's all. He said, a filament of sardonic laughter. Don't touch anything I own. Hester, it wasn't your fault. You understand? In any way. David nods inconclusively. Go to bed. Go ahead. JB leading Hester off. We'll get you home, and you'll sleep. Dibble. Dan follows them until he gets to the right edge, turning to David. If there's any blood on the car, will you clean it off? Please, will you? Dan goes. David looks after him. Shorey. Get me home, will you, Dave? David, huh? No, I'll stay a while. I want to look at the car. You take him, will you, Dad? Pat, taking hold of the back of Shorey's chair. Sure. Come on, Amos. Shorey. Well, wake up, jellyfish. 110 of the best acres in the valley. Not bad, eh? David, stunned. Just like that. Shorey. Never happens any other way, brother. Almost intones it. Jellyfish don't swim. It's the tide moves him. Out and in. Out and in. And in. Keep it in mind. To Pat. Let's go, Father. They push him out as David stands there, lost in a dream. Curtain. Scene 2. The barn near dawn. David is lying under the front end of the Marmon. Beside it, the hood stands on end on the floor. David is lying under the engine with one light near his head, hurriedly tightening a nut on the pan. There is one other light on over the bench, but this is shaded. After a moment, David hurriedly slides out from under and, eagerly looking at the engine, wipes his hands. He is about to get into the car to start it when a soft knock from offstage right is heard. Startled, he peers through the darkness. David. Who's that? surprised. Hester. Hester. She comes out of the darkness at right. Aren't you finished yet? David, glancing defensively at the car. What are you doing up? What time is it? Hester. It's almost 5. I called your house. I just couldn't sleep. Belle said you were still here. Can I watch you? David, it's pretty cold in here. You'll catch cold. Hester. She goes to him, takes his face in her hands, and kisses him. You didn't kiss me yet. David, with growing ill ease. Please, Hess, I gotta figure something out here. I wish you'd leave me alone for a while. Please? Hester, with quiet astonishment and compassion. Haven't you figured it out yet? David. Oh, I got it just about, but not... Stops. Hess, please leave me alone. David walks from her and pretends to study the engine. Hester. Davy. David. Yeah? Hester. You're going to be able to fix it, aren't you? David. Don't you think I can? Hester. I know you can. David. Then why do you ask me? Hester. Because in the Burley garage, they didn't know how to fix it. David. He straightens. Slight pause. How do you know? Hester. JB told me. He's going to tell you in the morning after you're finished. He didn't want to scare you about it. David, with growing fear. That can't be. They got regular trained mechanics in the Burley garage. Hester. But it's true. Mr. Dibble said they wanted to take the whole thing apart and charge him $150, and he wouldn't let them because... David comes to her anxiously. Why'd they want to take the whole thing apart? Hester, seeing his bewilderment clearer. Well, I don't know, Davy. David. Well, what'd they tell him was wrong, don't you remember? Hester, her sob threatening. Well, Davy, don't shout at me that way. I don't know anything about cars. She begins to cry. David, with the pain of guilt. Oh, Hester, don't cry, please. I'll fix it. I'll find out what the matter is. Please, stop it, will you? The pain it causes him makes him turn and almost march to the car, on the point of weeping himself. I never heard an engine make that sound. I took the pan off. I took the head off. I looked at the valves. I just don't know what it is, Hez. It's turning off center somewhere, and I can't find it. I can't. Hester, her sobbing vanishes as she senses his loss. That's all right, Davy. It'll be all right. Maybe you better go to bed. You look so tired. It really doesn't matter so much. David, she growing taller upon his guilt. Gosh, Hess, there never was a girl like you. He goes to her and kisses her. I swear there never was. Hester, don't ever try for anything I want, if it worries you too much to get it, Davy. David, he kisses her cheek, with swift resolution. You go home and go to bed. I'll find out what's the matter. I'll do it. You go. Hester. All right, Davy. 'Cause JB was telling Mr. Dibble such great things about you. He's got a marvelous thing to tell you in the morning. David. What? Hester, I can't tell you till you finish. David, please, Hess, what did he say? Hester, no, fix it first. Pause. JB wants to tell you himself. He made me promise. Good night. David. Good night, Hess. Hester, going and waving. And don't worry. About anything, okay? David, I won't. He watches her go, then turns to the car, goes and stands over it, tapping his nose with his finger thoughtfully, then lightly punching his fist into his palm in the heartbeat rhythm, faster, then bursting out loud in a whisper. God damn. The sound of a man walking into the shop rather slowly from offstage right is heard. David turns toward the sound and stands still watching. Gustav Eberson enters. He is a strong man. His suit is pressed but too small for him. He wears a white shirt, a plain brown overcoat. He is smiling warmly but with the self-effacing manner of an intruder. David says nothing as he approaches. Gus, a slight German accent. Excuse me, are you Mr. Beeves? David. Yeah. Slight pause. Gus. My name is Eberson. Gus Eberson. With an apologetic nod and smile. Are you very busy? I could, of course, come back. 4 o'clock in the morning is not the best time to visit. David. I'm busy, but what can I do for you? Gus. I moved into town last night, and I couldn't wait to see my first morning. I noticed your light. I thought we could know each other. I thought we ought to know each other. David, taken. I'm glad to know you. I was almost hoping you were a hold-up man and you'd knock me unconscious. Gus. I didn't mean to walk in so invisibly. I'm opening a repair garage on the other side of the avenue. David. Repair garage? You mean to repair cars? Gus, earnestly, worriedly. I want to assure you, Mr. Beeves, that if I didn't think there is plenty of business here for both of us, I would never set up a place in this town. David. A faint tightness cramps in his voice. Oh, there's plenty of business for two here, plenty. Where's your shop? Gus. Over there on Poplar Street, right next to the grocery store. David. Oh, that place. Gosh, nobody's been in that building for years. We used to say it was haunted. Gus. Maybe it is. Laughs lightly at himself. I have very little machinery. As a matter of fact, quite happily, I have very little money, too. So possibly I will not be troubling you very long. David, with emphatic assurance. Oh, you'll make out all right. Vaguely indicates the shop. There's nothing to it. You come from around here? Gus. No, I was with the Ford Company, the River Rouge plant, for several years. Last year and 4 months I was by the Hudson Motor people. David, breathlessly. Well, I guess you ought to know your stuff. Gus, sensing extra hearty, therefore. What is there to know? You're probably much better than I am. David. No, that's all right. I just meant... Gus. I'm not in the world to become rich. I was doing very well in Detroit. David. Then why'd you come here? Gus. It's my nature. I cannot get used. I shall run. I shall work. All the time rushing. To tell you the truth, I was 5 years with Fords, and not one good friend did I have. Here, I hope, it will be more conducive to such activities as I always enjoy. A small town and so forth. I am Austrian, you understand. Meanwhile, I hope you will not object too strongly of my arrival? David, entranced. Hell no. Lots of luck to you. I got no right to object. Extends his hand jerkily. Gus shakes hands. Rights is not the question. I want to be welcome. Otherwise, I will... David, softly. Gus holds on to his hand. No, you're welcome here. You are. Gus. Thank you. Laughs softly, thankfully. Their hands part. Gus turns a slow, full circle looking at the shop. David watches him like a vision. At last, the Austrian faces him again, quietly. How old are you? David. Going on 22? Gus, indicating the car, the shop, everything. How did you know what to do? You studied somewhere, mechanics? David, with pride and yet uneasiness. The Austrian has grown very tall in his eyes. Oh no, I just picked it up, kinda. Wanders near the Marmon as though to hide it. But I guess I got plenty to learn. Gus. No, no. The best mechanics is made in this fashion. You must not feel at all, how shall I say, at a loss. Pause. They hold each other's gaze in a moment of understanding. Slowly, the Austrian's eyes turn toward the Marmon. David, as though relinquishing it, moves aside now, not screening it any longer. What's his trouble? David, still entranced, and yet he must laugh as he confesses. You got me there. I've been at it all night. Gus, sauntering easily to the car. Oh? What he complains of? David, for a moment he holds back. Then the last shred of resentment fades and he bursts out. She runs with a peculiar kind of a shudder, like a rubbing somewhere inside. Gus, she misfires? David, that's what's so funny. She fires on 8 and the carburetor's set right on the button. Pause. Gus looks down at the engine. David is bent over watching his face. Gus, if you feel like it, you can start the engine. David looks at him in silence. You know what it is? Gus reaches to him quickly. Look, boy, tell me and I will leave the town. I'll never come back. David, no. No, I want it to be just the way it ought to be, the way it happened. David goes to the car door, gets in, starts the motor. The Austrian stands listening for 5 seconds, then snaps his hand for the motor to be switched off. It is quiet again. David comes slowly out of the car and stands beside the Austrian, watching him. Gus, it is very rare. In a car so new, it comes sometimes with the Marmon, however. David, softly. What is it? Gus turns straight to him. The crankshaft is sprung. David, for a long moment, he stares into the Austrian's face. How could you tell by listening? Gus, same way you do for pistons. You know. You gonna work now? David looks at the car. Yeah. He hurries around the front of the car, picks up a wrench, comes around and sets the wrench on a heat nut and starts forcing it. Gus hesitates for a moment, then lays his hand on David. Don't take the head off. David stops. I mean, you don't need to necessarily. David stops moving. The wrench clatters out of his hand. He stands nearly trembling before the Austrian, who suddenly turns. I'll go. David stops him. No. I always knew a time would come when this would happen. I mean, somebody like you would come and then I'd just pack up. I knew it all the time. Gus, that's nonsense. You fixed plenty of cars, no doubt. You're a mechanic. David. No, I'm not really. I don't know anything about metals and ratios, and I was almost going to tow it to the shop in Newton. Would you tell me what to do? Gus. Gladly. And maybe sometimes I need a hand, you'll drop by. All right? David. Oh, I'd be glad to. Gus grips his shoulder and points under the car. First, you take the pan down. David, slight pause. Yeah? Gus, then you drop the bearings. Label them so you know where to put them back. David, yeah? Gus, then you drop the main bearings for the crankshaft. David, yeah? Gus, Then you drop the shaft itself. Take it up to Newton. There's a good shop there. Tell them to exchange for a new shaft. David, can't I straighten this one? Gus, is not possible for you. David, could you straighten it? Gus, that would depend. But I sold my instruments for this. You go to work now. Go ahead. David starts to move. You in a hurry to go away? Gus, I'll stay. I'll watch you. David, thankfully. Okay. He gets down on his knees and is about to get under the car. You feel like working? Just for a couple of minutes? Gus, you would like me to? David, I always wanted to see how somebody else works, you know? Gus, all right. Come on, we'll rip her open. He pulls off his coat. You got a socket, a quarter-inch? David, a new excitement in him. I ain't got sockets yet, but... Gus, that's all right. Give me an open end. David goes for the wrench quickly. How much oil you got in here? David, finding the wrench. Just a couple of quarts. I just ran her a minute. I'll drain her. He gets under the car quickly, opening the drain nuts, setting a can under it as... Gus, are you married? David, not yet. Under the car, but pretty soon. Are you? Gus, ready to work, he kneels on one knee beside the car. No, but I'm always hopeful. There's a nice red-headed girl in this town? Preparing to slide under. David laughs. She gotta be red-headed? Gus, yes, I would prefer such a color. It always seemed to me in a small American town would be many red-headed girls. Probably this is because, in general, I like a small town. When this car has to be ready. Slides under. David moves to make room, sits on his heels beside the car. David, 11 in the morning if possible. You think it can? Gus, oh, plenty of time. You got a car to take this shaft to Newton? David, yeah, that Ford outside. Oh, my back. Gus, spread out, take it easy. David relaxes on the floor. Gosh, you sure swing that wrench. Lots of time I do something and I wonder how they do it in the factory. You know, officially. Gus. In the factory also, they wonder sometimes how it's done officially. David laughs. Yeah, I bet. Pause. Gus works. Gosh, I suddenly feel awful tired. I've been at it all night, you know. Gus. Sleep, go ahead. I'll wake you when it gets interesting. David. Don't you think you're doing this for nothing? I'll split the bill with you. Gus. Nonsense. Laughs. We'll even it up sometime. One hand washes the other. David's head comes down on his arm, his face toward the Austrian. For several moments, Gus works in silence. David's breathing comes in longer draughts. Gus, noticing his eyes closed. Mr. Beeves? David sleeps. Gus comes out from under the car, gets his own coat, and lays it over David and looks down at him. A smile comes to his face. He shakes his head wondrously and looks from David all around the shop. Then, happily and with a certain anticipation, he whispers, America. He bends, slides under the car as the lights go down. The lights come up on the same scene. From the large barn doors, a wide shaft of sunlight is pouring in. David is asleep where he was before, the coat still on him. But now the car is off the jack, and the hood is in place over the engine. The tools are in a neat pile nearby. Enter J.B., Dan Dibble, Hester, Patton, Amos. J.B. as they enter to Dan. We're a little early, so if he needs more time, you'll wait. Dan looks at David quietly. What did he do, sleep here all night? Amos. Must have. He never came home. J.B. to Dan. That's the type of character you're dealing with. I hope you don't forget to thank him. Dibble, fearfully touching the fender. It looks just the same as when I brought it. You think it's fixed? Hester goes to David. JB looks at David. Don't worry, it's fixed. Hester, should I wake him? JB, go ahead. I wanted to tell him right away. Hester bends over and shakes him lightly. Davy? Davy? David, huh? Hester, wake up. JB's here. It's morning. Laughs. Look at him. David, oh. Sits up and sees JB and Dibble. Oh, yeah. He gets up quickly, catching the coat as it falls from him. He looks at the coat for an instant. Hester, fixing his shirt straight. Is it all done? David, what? I'm asleep yet. Wait a minute. He rubs his head and walks a few steps. JB to Dibble with a strongly possessive pride. That's when you're young. Sleep anywhere. Nothing bothers you. David, what time is it? JB, about 10:30. David, astonished and frightened. 10:30? Gosh, I didn't mean to sleep that long. Looks around, suddenly anxious. Hester laughs. You look so funny. JB, well, how'd you do, Dave? All finished? David, finished? Well, he looks at the car. JB, if you're not, Dan can wait. David, yeah, just a second. He looks around the shop. Hester, looking for your tools? They're right there on the floor. Here. David, he keeps looking all around for an instant. Looks at the tools. Oh, okay. He looks at the car as though it were explosive. He lifts the hood and looks at the engine as... JB, how was it? Tough job? David, huh? Yeah, pretty tough. JB, anything wrong? David, no, He gets on his knees and looks under the engine. Dibble, can I start her up now? David gets to his feet, looks at everyone as though in a dream. Okay, try her. Wait a minute, let me. Dibble following him to the car door. Now don't dirty the upholstery. JB, don't worry about the upholstery. Dan, come over here. Dibble. Coming to the front of the car where JB and Hester are, they always get in with their dirty clothes. The engine starts. It hums. Smoothly, quietly. JB proudly smiling to Dan, who creeps closer to it and listens. Hester watches JB, teetering on the edge of expectation, then watches Dan. After a moment, the engine is shut off. David comes out of the car, comes slowly into view, his eyes wide. Pat to Dan of Dave. Highly skilled. JB beaming to Dibble. Well, you damn fool. Dibble excitedly. Why, she does sound fine. He snoops around the car. David. Look, JB, JB raises his fist and bangs the fender. God damn, Dave, I always said it. You know what you did? Hester. JB's going to... JB to Hester. I'm paying for it. At least let me tell it. Dan, come over here first and tell Dave what they did to you in Burley. Listen to this one, Dave. Pat, I want you to hear this. Pat and Amos come into the group. Dibble, feeling the edge of the fender. I think he bumped it here. JB, oh, the hell with that. Come over here and tell him. Dibble comes. What about that guy in Burley? Dibble. Well, there's a garage and Burley does tractor work, but he's not reasonable. JB, tell him what he does. Dibble. I brought this one to him, and he says I'll have to take her plumb apart. Every screw and bolt of her. He had his mind set on charging me $131 for the job. So I figured it was just about time I stopped subsidizing the Burley Garage Incorporated. Pat. That's intelligent, Mr. Dibble. David. Did he tell you what was wrong with the car, the Burley man? Dibble. Well, yes, he did. He always tells you something, but I can't... Now, wait a minute. These things have a dingus they call a crankshaft. He said it was crooked or busted or dented. JB laughs to David, then back to Dan. On a brand new Marmon. What the hell did he want with the crankshaft? Pat. Scandalous. David. Look, JB, let me tell you. JB drawing David and Dan together. Go ahead, David. And listen to this, Dan. This is the first honest word you ever heard out of a mechanic. To David. Go on. Tell this poor sucker what the matter was. David stands dumbly, looking into JB's ecstatic face. He turns to Hester. Hester, hardly able to stand still, pridefully. Tell him, Davy. David turns back to JB. He sighs. Just a lot of small things, that's all. David walks a few steps away to a fender and absently touches it. It could be taken for modesty. Amos is now to the side, resting a foot on the car bumper, watching in wonder. JB. Well, what do you say, Danny? Now you're looking at a mechanic. Pat, to Dan of Dave. At the age of 6, he fixed the plug on an iron. Dibble goes to David. Look, David, I have a proposition for you. Whenever there's a job to do on my tractors, charge me for parts and that's all. If you do that for me, I could guarantee you more. David. I'm much obliged to you, Mr. Dibble, but I'm not tooled up for tractor work. JB. Now wait a minute. David. Almost shouting with tension. Let me say something, will you? To work on heavy engines like that, and tractors in general, a man has got to be well, I'm not tooled up for it, that's all. I haven't got the machinery. JB, businesslike. But you've got the machinery. Hester, listen to this, Davy. David looks at him. JB, you go out and buy everything you want. Fix up this building. Lay out a concrete driveway in the front. I'll pay the bills. Give me 1% on my money. Roundly. Let me be some good in my life. David, as though a fever were rising in him, his voice begins to sour. I don't know if I'm ready for that, JB. I'd have to study about tractors. JB, then study. Now's the time, Dave. You're young, strong. Pat to Dan. He's very strong. Dibble, taking out a roll. How much do I owe you, boy? David looks at Dan. David, owe me? JB, make it $60 flat, Dave, since it wasn't as hard as we thought. David looks at JB, who won't wait for him to object. 60 flat, Dan. Dibble counts laboriously, peeling off each bill into David's unwilling hand. 1, 2, 3, continues. Hester, joyously amused at Dan. What are those, all ones? Dibble, all I carry is ones. Never can tell when you'll leave a 5 by mistake. Continues counting. Government ought to print different sizes. JB, how's it feel to have 2 stars, eh, Pat? With a sweep of his hand. I can see a big red sign out there way up in the air. Dave Beeves Incorporated. Tractor Station. Hester has noticed the coat beside the car. Hester, holding the coat up. Did you get a new coat? Dibble continues counting into David's hand. David, huh? Quickly turns to Hester and the coat. Dan Dibble continues counting. David stares at the coat, suddenly in the full blast of all the facts. Now all but Dibble are looking at the coat. Amos feels the coat. Where'd you get this? Dibble, hold still. 53, 54, 50. David looks at Amos, then down at his hand into which the money is still dropping. He then looks again at Amos to him. Amos, what's the matter? Hester, what's come over you? David suddenly hands the money to Hester. Dibble, say! David, his hand recedes from the bills as though they were burning. To Hester, take it, will you? He starts to point somewhere off right as though he were being called. Then his hand drops, and with gathering speed he strides out. Hester, astonished. Davy! She hurries to watch him leaving. To the right, halts. Why, he's running! Calling in alarm, Davy! She runs out. JB, Pat, and Dan stand watching them open-mouthed as they disappear down the driveway. Amos is center, downstage. Dibble. What in the world come over the boy? I didn't finish paying him. They stand looking right. Amos looks at the coat. He starts turning it inside out, examining it carefully, perplexed. Slow curtain.